Assalamu alaikum, I'm Abdul Haseeb, and what brings me to your proposition today is a big deal. It's the deal principle. Now, most people relate productivity with the time spent working. At the workplace, that's a bad indicator, a really bad indicator because we waste a lot of time at our workplace. Our working time is probably the wasting time. When it comes to productivity, less is more. Less is more. That is simply not a misinterpretation or a mispronunciation. This is the thing that less is more. Now, most people they think and they don't. Have you ever thought that whatever you do, whatever work you do, seems kind of busy, a busy work that gets you nowhere? Have you ever thought that? Because it seems that you have realized that, but you never thought that. Maybe that gets you nowhere, but the Pareto principle explains it barely. The Pareto principle, or we could call it 80/20 80/20 principle. The 80/20 rule. It actually indicates, it dictates that the average work that you produce, about 80% of what you will achieve will only take 20% of your actions. Only 20% of 80% what you will achieve. That's probably more than 3/4. Almost to the end. Now, to put it in simple words, what the 80/20 rule indicates, the principle, the idea of the principle is this, that 80% of your productivity takes 20% of your time. That is obvious, right? But the bad part, the other half that we're not realizing, that we're not thinking, is this, that the other 20% productivity takes the 80% of the time. Now, towards the end, we're losing all our time. And what's the worst part? We like the 20% productivity more, which eats up 80% of our time. Now, think that where do you spend your time at your workplace, sitting, checking, going through your emails, through your Snapchat, through your Instagram, through your social media banners, different things, so different CVs, resumes, different applications, or anything that concerns your work. Anything. You're sitting there's probably useless meetings, or you're just roaming around from cubicle to cubicle. Just think about it, that if you just put aside that 80% of time that you spend, now we are spending that 80% of time, which certainly does not move the needles of our real goals. Not even the tiniest bit. And even if there's a tiniest bit, we can blame the wind. It's not the 80% of the time that you're giving. Not at all. Now, since we are giving it, we need to put that aside. We need to eliminate time-draining tasks and move closer towards our goal. Because that's a big deal. A big deal. Now, coming to the deal process, it's not a grand, singular big deal, but this deal has 4 little steps. Only 4. And the good thing is that you can remember them, because each alphabet is the step. So what comes first? D. Step number 1 is D, which is for definition. Now, the D over here is devoted to detaching yourself from the idea, from the principle that you have to work very, very, very hard to death just for a gold watch and a pat on the back. These are just assumptions, not facts. The assumptions, like the concepts. We have made them into concepts. We think That the most important thing is the relative income, the income we earn per hour, or the amount of money that we're generating each second is the most important thing. These are the concepts that need to be changed, that need to be abandoned. Because they're just assumptions, not facts. And there is a key exercise which can help us. Spend 5 minutes and define your dream. Very easy said than done. Just 3 words, define your dream. It is difficult for most of the people. There are people who can easily define their dreams, and we want to be one of those. Now, since it's so common, so mundane that define your dreams, define your goals, define the vision, define what you want to be, it's very easy, but if it does not have to be the things that you have to do, then make it the things that you need to do right now. Spend 5 minutes. Define that. What do you need to do with your life right now? If not, what's your dream? What's your future? What you have, your vision for what you want to be in the future? Define what you want to be right now. Spend 5 minutes. Now, that's okay. You've spent 5 minutes. You realize where you stand right now. Probably you did not define yourself, what you wanted to be right now. Or maybe you have, that's a good thing. But if you haven't, at least you would have defined what you are right now. And that would make things easier to dream. Now, since you have, spend another 5 minutes thinking about the nightmare, the worst nightmare you have. Related to that dream, what's the worst possible thing that can abandon you, that can resist you, that can pull you back from watching that dream, from living that dream, from achieving that dream? What's the worst possible thing? Now, since you have spent another 5 minutes, have you realized that what's that worst possible thing? If you have, then compare your dream with your nightmare. That possible nightmare, is that really so scary, so fearful, so resistive that it can resist you from living that dream, from watching that dream, from achieving that dream? Is it? You can do better. There can be better nightmares. So, what do? Spend another 5 minutes. You define yourself. Moving on to the next step, that is E, elimination. E is for elimination. Now, in this step, what I want to elaborate are the techniques. Some very straightforward techniques that one can use in daily lives to improve. Very straightforward. And in case you're wondering how they're very straightforward, the only reason is this, that they help us realize or probably set aside or pull away the things that seem very ordinary and regular in our professional lives, but are very boring and unproductive. Those are the things that take 80% of our time. Those are the things that we label as the 20% productivity. And we need to exercise to abandon them, just like the concepts. So the first thing to do is make a to-do list for tomorrow before today. Very common. You have to make a to-do list for the tomorrow, what you'll be doing tomorrow. That is okay, but since when you put an item, put an action, put a work, put a task on it, ask yourselves. Instead, don't ask yourselves. Because we have been asking ourselves for a very, very long time. It's time to imagine now. Imagine yourself doing that task. And you can imagine the colors, the selection of the jeans or the t-shirt or the dress shirt you want to wear, or the belt and the shoes. It depends upon you. But what you need to focus on is the frustration or the excitement or the delightment or the anger. I want you to focus on the emotions, on the expressions, on the sweat, on the smile, on the frowns while doing that task. That's what I want you to focus on. That's when you define yourself. Spend those 5 minutes imagining yourself doing that task. What would happen? You'll wake up the next morning and you'll do those tasks with aware knowing that they're worthwhile. Why? Because you had imagined what would happen, what would be the after effects, what would happen at that very moment when you are in the process of completing that task. You've imagined that with all real aspects considered. All the real aspects. Because we have to keep it real. We can't say that, yeah, it can be done. Keep it real, keep your feelings real, keep your expressions real, keep the sweat real. Keep it real. Now, since you have imagined it, probably that thing might not be on your list now. Because you may have understood that the 80% time that you'll be giving it is not worth the 20% productivity that you need. You need the 80% productivity, and probably if you have prioritized that, maybe the order would change. Maybe it will go from top to bottom or from bottom to top. You have made a to-do list that concerns for tomorrow. Stop multitasking. Stop it. Now, for example, if you have to write something, anything, an application or anything, close your email, close the email program, close the instant messenger program, close the web browser, close everything, and focus on the writing. Focus on the writing and nothing else. Nothing else. Believe me, the things, the tasks you'll do will churn out way more faster than you have thought. Way more faster. Because once you're doing lots of things at one time, there are people who can do this. There are people who can multitask very effectively. But to make a deal, we don't need to multitask. We have to close the deal, right? So stop multitasking. Go on a media fast. Abstain, avoid the television for a long time, right? You can use it for 1 hour for relaxation and enjoyment. And also prevent from the non-fiction, the science fiction, in the news, newspapers, and the different articles. What you'll recognize, what you'll know is that the media information overload was one of the attention deficits. That's what you'll realize. It was a multitask also. And that's not part of the deal. Finish your work by 4 p.m. every day and make your week till Thursday. There will be no Fridays. Even if you have to come on Friday, just compress it. Do nothing. Even better, just think how you can personally develop yourself, development issues. Just think about them. Do nothing. Do no work. Now the idea over here is to compress your productive time. I do not mean that you just put productivity aside. The thing is to make you realize that when you have the little time, when you have only 20% of the time, what will you achieve? 80% productivity. But when you'll have 80% of the time, 20% productivity. The thing is this, that when you compress yourselves, you prioritize. When you compress the time, you know that these are the most important tasks. If they are done in the given time, I'm free. I'm free. That's the point of compressing the productive time. Since you have compressed the productive time, you do not need to feel anything unnatural by just hanging a do not disturb sign out your door. If there are people who are interacting with you during some very important work, if there are people who are interpreting when to interrupt you just